Bradley Harlow stood beside his gleaming red Ferrari outside the Grand Cascade Hotel, cameras flashing as wealthy guests admired the self-made millionaire who seemingly had it all. Across the street, an elderly homeless man named Caleb Turner watched from the shadows, clutching a worn satchel close to his chest. When Bradley noticed him staring and decided to mock him in front of the crowd, offering the Ferrari if Caleb could fix its misfiring engine, laughter erupted and phones came out to record the humiliation. But as Caleb's weathered hands moved over the hood with unexpected precision, identifying the exact fault that professionals had missed, Bradley's smirk began to fade. What none of them knew was that the homeless man they were mocking had once designed the very technology Bradley's empire was built on. And tonight, 30 years of stolen legacy was about to come full circle. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The evening air carried the scent of expensive perfume and champagne as luxury cars lined the circular driveway of the Grandview Hotel. Crystal chandeliers glowed through massive windows, casting warm light onto the street below. Inside, a charity gala was in full swing, but outside, under the glow of camera flashes, Bradley Harlow commanded attention like he always did. His red Ferrari sat parked at an angle on the cobblestone entrance, positioned perfectly for photographs. The car's paint gleamed under the streetlights, reflecting the surrounding buildings in distorted waves of crimson. Bradley stood beside it, one hand resting possessively on the hood, his tailored navy suit fitting him like it had been painted on. His smile was practiced, confident, the kind that came from years of knowing people were watching. "This beauty," Bradley announced to a small crowd of guests who'd spilled out from the gala, "represents true engineering excellence, not the mass-produced garbage everyone drives these days." He ran his fingers along the car's sleek curves, his voice carrying that smooth, rehearsed quality of someone who'd given this speech before. "Nobody appreciates craftsmanship anymore. They just want cheap and convenient." The guests laughed politely, sipping their drinks. A few pulled out their phones to snap pictures. Bradley loved this part, the attention, the validation. He was handsome in that polished way that money could buy. Sharp jawline, perfectly styled dark hair with just enough gray at the temples to suggest wisdom, teeth so white they practically glowed. Across the street, partially hidden in the shadow of a bus stop, an elderly black man watched the scene unfold. Caleb Turner stood with his shoulders slightly hunched, his worn jacket pulled tight against the October chill. His face was weathered, lined with years of hardship, but his eyes were sharp and alert. In his gnarled hands he clutched a faded, canvas satchel that looked like it had seen better decades. Caleb had been walking past when the sound caught his attention. Not the laughter or the champagne glasses clinking, but something else. Something off. His head tilted slightly, listening. There it was again, a subtle misfiring in the Ferrari's engine, a rhythm that wasn't quite right. Years of training, buried under layers of homelessness and forgotten accomplishments, surfaced instinctively. "Fuel injections off," he muttered to himself, his voice gravelly from disuse. "Third cylinder's getting too much pressure." He didn't mean to speak loud enough for anyone to hear, but sound traveled strangely on cold nights. Bradley, mid-sentence about Italian engineering, stopped talking. His eyes scanned the area until they landed on Caleb across the street. "Excuse me?" Bradley called out, his tone dripping with amusement. "Did someone say something?" The crowd turned to look. Caleb froze, wishing he could disappear into the shadows, but it was too late. Bradley's smile widened, and not in a kind way. "You there? The gentleman at the bus stop. Did you have something to say about my car?" Caleb hesitated. Every instinct told him to walk away, to avoid trouble. But there was something about the car's sound that bothered him. a wrongness he couldn't ignore. Slowly, he stepped forward into the light. "I said your fuel injection's off," Caleb repeated, his voice steadier now. "Third cylinder. You can hear it in the idle." The crowd went silent. Then someone giggled. Then another. Soon, scattered laughter rippled through the guests. Bradley's eyes lit up with cruel delight. This was better than any scripted moment. "Oh, this is rich," he said, walking toward Caleb with long, confident strides. "You think you know cars, old man? You?" He stopped a few feet away, looking Caleb up and down with exaggerated slowness. Caleb's jacket was patched in 3 places. His pants were too big, held up with a frayed belt. His shoes had seen thousands of miles of pavement. Bradley took all this in with a showman's timing. "Tell you what," Bradley announced, turning back to his audience with theatrical flair. "I'm a generous man, a charitable man, as tonight demonstrates." More laughter. "So here's my offer. You think you know what's wrong with this Ferrari? Fine, make this baby run properly, and it's yours." The laughter exploded now, loud and sharp. People pulled out their phones, recording. This would make great social media content. Eccentric millionaire challenges, homeless man. Bradley was already imagining the headlines. Caleb looked at the car, then at Bradley, then at all the faces staring at him. He'd been through worse humiliations. He'd slept in doorways, eaten from dumpsters, been invisible to thousands of people who walked past him every day. What was one more moment of being made small? He approached the Ferrari slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. Up close, the car was even more beautiful, all flowing lines and precision engineering. His hands hovered over the hood, not quite touching. The fuel regulators misaligned, Caleb said quietly, his fingers tracing the air above the metal. "Probably happened during your last service. Common mistake if you don't know what you're looking at. I could fix it in about 2 minutes with the right tools." Bradley laughed, a sound without warmth. "Oh, absolutely not." He stepped between Caleb and the car, his voice sharp. "Don't touch it. Your hands might stain the paint." The crowd roared with laughter. Camera flashes popped like tiny explosions. Caleb's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but resignation. He'd expected this. He stepped back without a word, his head lowering slightly. "That's what I thought," Bradley said, playing to the crowd. "Lots of talk, but when it comes to actually doing something..." He made a dismissive gesture. More laughter, more photos. Among the guests, a young woman in a navy dress watched the scene with growing discomfort. Elena Carter was 28, slender, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun. She worked as an engineer at Harlow Industries, Bradley's automotive design company. She'd come to the gala because attendance was strongly encouraged for all senior staff. Now she wished she'd stayed home. Elena knew Bradley could be difficult. Everyone at the company knew that. But this felt different, cruel. The old man was backing away quietly, without protest, which somehow made it worse. He wasn't fighting back, wasn't arguing. He was just accepting the humiliation, as if he'd known it was coming. The crowd began filtering back inside, the entertainment over. Bradley stayed outside a moment longer, posing with his Ferrari for a few more photos. Elena watched Caleb shuffle down the street, his satchel pressed against his chest. She made a decision. "I'll be right back," she told her colleague Marcus, a stocky man with kind eyes, who'd also looked uncomfortable during the exchange. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked. "Just need some air," Elena said, already walking toward the hotel's side entrance. She found the hotel's kitchen loading dock and convinced a sympathetic cook to pack up some leftover dinner: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. 10 minutes later, carrying a paper bag that was warm to the touch, she walked down the street in the direction Caleb had gone. She found him 3 blocks away, sitting on a low wall near a closed storefront. His satchel lay beside him, and he was looking at nothing in particular, lost in thought. "Excuse me," Elena said softly, not wanting to startle him. Caleb looked up, wariness crossing his features. People didn't usually approach him unless they wanted him to move along. "I saw what happened back there," Elena continued. "That was wrong. I'm sorry." She held out the bag. "I thought you might be hungry." Caleb stared at the offering, then at her face, searching for the trick. But Elena's eyes held only genuine concern. Slowly, he reached out and took the bag. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with unexpected emotion. "That's kind of you, miss." "Elena," she said. "Elena Carter." "Caleb," he replied. "Caleb Turner." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Elena wanted to say more, wanted to ask questions, but she could tell Caleb was eager for her to leave. Being grateful to strangers was exhausting in its own way. "Take care," Elena said finally, turning to go. As she walked away, she heard Caleb mutter something under his breath, so quiet she almost missed it. "I built engines like that before he was even born." Elena stopped, turned, but Caleb had already opened the bag and was focused on the food, seemingly unaware he'd spoken aloud. She hesitated, wanting to ask what he meant, but the moment had passed. With a last glance back, she returned to the gala. Inside the hotel's grand ballroom, Bradley Harlow stood at a podium, a microphone in his hand. The room had quieted, all attention on him. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and the walls were draped in elegant cream and gold. "Tonight," Bradley began, his voice smooth and commanding, "we gather not just to celebrate innovation, but to look toward the future." He paused for effect. "And I'm thrilled to announce that Harlow Industries will soon unveil something revolutionary, a new engine design that will change the automotive industry forever." Murmurs of interest rippled through the crowd. Bradley's smile grew. "This isn't just an improvement on existing technology," he continued. "This is a complete reimagining of how vehicles can operate. Clean, efficient, powerful. I call it the Harlow Hybrid System, and when it launches next quarter, it will make us, the next Tesla, the next legend of American innovation." Applause filled the room. Elena, standing near the back with Marcus, felt a strange unease settle in her stomach. Something about Bradley's speech felt off. The Harlow Hybrid System was impressive, yes, but the design had come to them relatively recently, already mostly complete. Bradley had presented it as something he'd been working on for years, but Elena had only seen the prototype plan 6 months ago. Where had it really come from? She pushed the thought away, telling herself she was being paranoid. But Caleb's muttered words echoed in her mind. "I built engines like that before he was even born." The night deepened. The gala wound down. Guests filtered out to their luxury cars and drivers. The hotel staff began the long process of cleaning up, gathering abandoned champagne glasses and crumpled napkins. Behind the hotel, in the narrow alley where the dumpsters sat in neat rows, Caleb Turner found shelter for the night. It wasn't ideal, but it was familiar. He'd slept in worse places. At least the wall blocked most of the wind. He settled onto a flattened cardboard box, his satchel serving as a pillow. But before trying to sleep, he opened the bag and pulled out its contents with reverent care. Papers, yellowed with age. Photographs, their edges worn soft. And blueprints, technical drawings on heavy paper that had somehow survived decades of rough handling. Caleb spread one of the blueprints across his lap, angling it toward the dim light filtering from a nearby window. The drawing showed a complex engine system, with notations in his own handwriting from years ago. In the corner, barely visible, was a faded military seal and the words, "Classified, Naval Engineering Division." His fingers traced the lines he'd drawn so long ago, when his hands had been steady and his mind had been sharp, and the future had seemed full of possibility. Back when he'd been a different person, living a different life. "They took everything," he whispered to the blueprints, "but they couldn't take this. Couldn't take what's in my head." He carefully folded the papers and returned them to the satchel. Sleep would come hard tonight, as it always did when memories surfaced. But for now, he lay back against the cold brick wall and closed his eyes, listening to the distant sound of traffic. Somewhere in the night, a car engine started. Even from blocks away, Caleb could hear that same misfiring in the Ferrari's third cylinder. He allowed himself a small, bitter smile. "Still the same mistake," he murmured. Then, as if fate had a sense of irony, he heard something else. The sound of an expensive car approaching, then sputtering, then dying. The sound came from the street beyond the alley. Caleb sat up, listening intently. Another attempt to start the engine, another failure. The starter motor whined, but the engine wouldn't catch. Slowly, Caleb stood and walked to the edge of the alley. He peered around the corner. There, pulled over to the curb with its hazard lights blinking, sat Bradley Harlow's red Ferrari. And there, standing beside it with his phone pressed to his ear, was Bradley himself, fury evident in every line of his body. "I don't care what time it is," Bradley snapped into the phone. "Get someone out here now. Yes, now!" He kicked the car's tire, then winced, probably remembering how much the tire cost. Caleb watched for a long moment. He could fix it. Could walk over there, pop the hood, and have the car running in under a minute. The problem wasn't complicated, but he didn't move. Instead, he whispered into the darkness, "Still the same mistake." Then Caleb Turner turned and walked back to his spot behind the dumpster, lay down on his cardboard bed, and finally, mercifully, fell asleep. Above, the stars were hidden by city lights. The night was cold. And somewhere, a Ferrari that was supposed to represent perfection sat broken on a dark street, waiting for someone who understood it well enough to make it run. Morning came to the city with that peculiar October brightness, all sharp angles and long shadows. Caleb woke stiff and cold, his back protesting as he rolled off the cardboard. The alley smelled of overripe fruit and old grease from the hotel kitchen. He gathered his things slowly, giving his body time to adjust, and made his way toward the street. What he didn't expect was the crowd. A small group of people had gathered around the red Ferrari, which still sat where it had died the night before. They were taking pictures, posting to social media, laughing. Caleb kept his distance, watching from across the street. A young man with his phone held high was recording a video. "So get this," he said to his camera. "This is that Millionaire's Ferrari, the one from the video last night. Dude mocked a homeless guy about fixing his car, and now look, it's completely dead. Can't even make it a full night. Talk about instant karma." The group laughed and moved on, but more people came. By mid-morning, the Ferrari had become a minor internet sensation. The video of Bradley humiliating Caleb had gone viral overnight, and now the car's breakdown seemed like cosmic justice. Caleb watched it all with mixed feelings. Part of him felt vindicated. A larger part just felt tired. Inside Harlow Industries' downtown headquarters, Bradley Harlow was having the worst morning of his professional life. He stood in his office on the 30th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city he usually enjoyed. Today, he saw nothing but problems. His phone kept buzzing. Social media notifications, news requests. That damn video had been viewed 3 million times. "It's a disaster," said Veronica Pierce, his PR director, a sharp woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair. She stood by his desk, tablet in hand. "The hashtag Jew or Ferrari karma is trending. People are calling you out for mocking that man." "It was a joke," Bradley snapped. "Can't anyone take a joke anymore?" "Not when it's filmed and shared 3 million times," Veronica replied coolly. And the car breaking down immediately after? Sir, the optics are terrible. Bradley slammed his hand on the desk. Get the car fixed, today. I need it running before the investor event on Friday. Marcus Hamilton is flying in specifically to see the Harlow hybrid demonstration, and I need everything perfect. Already called your mechanic, Veronica said. He'll have it towed to the shop this morning. Good. Bradley turned back to the window, jaw tight. And find out who posted that video. Maybe we can— Absolutely not, Veronica interrupted. Any attempt to suppress it will make things 10 times worse. We ride this out quietly. But Bradley wasn't listening. His mind was on Friday's event. Marcus Hamilton represented a consortium of investors prepared to put $50 million into the Harlow hybrid system. One weekend of bad PR wouldn't derail that. Couldn't derail it. Get me good news, Bradley said dismissively. I don't want to hear about that homeless man again. Veronica left without another word. Bradley stood alone in his office, staring at his reflection in the window. For just a moment, something uncomfortable flickered across his face. Not quite guilt, but close. He pushed it away. Across town, Elena Carter sat in her apartment's small kitchen, laptop open, coffee growing cold beside her. She'd been up since dawn, unable to shake her curiosity about Caleb Turner. The jacket she'd given him last night had contained a name tag she'd noticed earlier, but hadn't read carefully. C. Turner, Naval Engineering, 1974. She'd seen it while getting the food, clipped inside the collar. This morning she'd started searching. Caleb Turner, Aerospace Engineer, she muttered, scanning search results. Most hits were for different people, but then she found it, a newspaper article from 1994. Aerospace Engineer reported missing, read the headline from the Richmond Times. Dr. Caleb Turner, 47, a decorated engineer who worked on classified naval propulsion systems, has been reported missing by family members. Turner had recently resigned from Harlow Industries following an undisclosed dispute. Authorities suspect he may have left the area voluntarily. Elena's coffee cup paused halfway to her mouth. Harlow Industries. Caleb had worked for Bradley's company, or rather for Bradley's father, who'd founded the company before Bradley took over. She clicked deeper, finding more fragments. Caleb Turner had been brilliant, a pioneer in hybrid propulsion systems for military applications. Multiple patents from the 70s and 80s bore his name. Then in the mid-90s, he'd vanished from all records. What happened to you? Elena whispered to the screen. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Emergency meeting, 2 p.m., the Ferrari thing. Elena sighed and closed her laptop. But her mind kept working. Caleb had said he'd built engines before Bradley was born. The Harlow hybrid system that Bradley was so proud of. When had that design really originated? She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Before the meeting, she had somewhere to be. The junkyard sat on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling maze of rusted metal and forgotten machines. Elena had called ahead, and the owner had mentioned seeing an elderly black man there earlier, someone who sometimes helped sort through old parts in exchange for pocket change. She found Caleb in the back section, surrounded by engine components. He was showing 2 neighborhood kids, couldn't have been more than 10, how to fix a bicycle chain. See, you don't need to force it, Caleb was saying, his voice patient. The mechanism wants to work. You just have to understand what it's trying to do. He guided the smaller kid's hands, and the chain slipped into place with a satisfying click. The kid's face lit up. It works. Sure does, Caleb said, a genuine smile crossing his weathered face. Now remember, when something breaks, first step isn't getting angry. First step is understanding why it broke. The kids thanked him enthusiastically and pedaled away on their now functional bike. Caleb watched them go, that smile lingering before he noticed Elena approaching. His expression shuddered immediately. "Miss Carter," he said cautiously. "Didn't expect to see you again." "I brought coffee," Elena said, holding up 2 cups from a nearby diner. "Thought you might like some." Caleb eyed her warily but accepted the cup. "That's kind. What do you want?" Elena appreciated the directness. "To talk. About your past. About Harlow Industries." Caleb's entire body went rigid. He set down the coffee without drinking it. "Don't know what you're talking about." "I found articles," Elena pressed gently. "From 1994. You worked for the company. You were an aerospace engineer, specialized in hybrid propulsion. Then you disappeared." For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. His eyes drifted to the distant skyline, where glass towers caught the afternoon sun. "That was a different life," he finally said. "Different person." "What happened?" Caleb shook his head. "Doesn't matter now." But Elena persisted, her voice soft but insistent. "Last night, you said you'd built engines like that Ferrari before Bradley was born. You weren't just guessing about that fuel injector, were you? You knew, because you'd worked on systems like it." Caleb looked at her for a long time. Something in Elena's face, the genuine concern, the lack of judgment, made him hesitate. He'd been alone with his story for so long. "Sit," he said finally, gesturing to an overturned crate. Elena sat. Caleb remained standing, his hands working nervously at a piece of cloth he'd picked up. "I worked on hybrid propulsion systems for the Navy," he began slowly. "Classified projects, combining traditional combustion with electric assist. This was back in the 70s, 80s. The technology wasn't ready for consumer use yet, but the concepts were sound." He paused, gathering himself. "In 1993, I developed a prototype that solved the key efficiency problem. A new kind of regulator system that could switch between power sources without losing performance. It was revolutionary. Would have changed everything." Elena listened without interrupting. "I was working for Harlow Industries by then, doing contract work on civilian applications. Bradley's father, Robert, he wanted to commercialize my design, but he wanted me to sign over all the patents to the company. Full ownership. I'd get a one-time payment and nothing else." Caleb's voice hardened. "I refused. It was my life's work. I wanted proper credit, proper compensation. Robert Harlow didn't like that. He had lawyers, connections. I had nothing. One day I came to work and found out I was locked out. They'd copied my designs without permission, changed just enough details to claim it was their own development. They stole it," Elena breathed. "I tried to fight back legally, but I couldn't afford the lawyers they could. My wife got sick around the same time. Cancer. Between legal bills and medical bills, I lost everything. The house, savings, everything. When she died in '94, I just gave up, walked away from it all." His eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "Been on the streets ever since. Easier to be invisible than to keep fighting battles you can't win." Elena felt fury building in her chest. "Do you have proof? Anything that shows the original designs were yours?" Caleb smiled bitterly and patted his satchel. "Oh, I have proof." From the bag, he pulled out a rusted metal plate, about 6 inches square. Etched into its surface were technical specifications and, most importantly, a patent number. "This was from the original prototype," Caleb said. "Built it myself in '92. That patent number is registered in my name." Elena pulled out her phone and photographed the plate, then opened her work email. She scrolled back several months until she found the internal memo about the Harlow hybrid system. There, in the technical specifications, was a patent number. The same number. "Oh my God," Elena whispered. "Bradley's revolutionary new engine is your design. He's not inventing anything. He's using your work." Caleb looked unsurprised. "Like father, like son, I suppose." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Around them, the junkyard was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic. What do you want to do? Elena asked carefully. Caleb shook his head. Nothing. I'm too old, too tired. I didn't tell you this so you'd fight my battles. I just wanted someone to know the truth before I'm gone. But this is wrong, Elena insisted. Bradley is about to make millions off your work. You're living on the streets while he takes credit for your genius. And what would exposing him get me? Caleb asked quietly. At best, a legal fight I still can't afford. At worst, nothing. The powerful don't fall because people like me speak up. They fall when the ground beneath them cracks. Elena wanted to argue, but she saw the exhaustion in Caleb's eyes. This man had been fighting for decades just to survive. He didn't have energy left for crusades. At least, Elena said slowly, let me help you. There's an investor event Friday. Bradley's presenting the Harlow hybrid to major funders. If you came, if people saw what you could do, they'd see a homeless man interrupting their expensive party. Caleb interrupted. I know how that looks, Miss Carter. Been living it for years. Then we change how it looks. Elena's mind was racing now. You said you don't want revenge, just acknowledgement, just dignity. What if you had one chance to prove who you really are? Caleb studied her face. Why do you care? You work for him. Because what happened to you is wrong, Elena said simply. And because I became an engineer to build things that matter, not to help rich men steal from people who can't fight back. She held his gaze. Friday, come to the event. Don't make any trouble. Just come. Let people see you. Let them wonder. And if the moment is right, maybe it's time you made that engine run again. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then so softly, Elena almost missed it, he said, maybe. That evening, after Elena left, Caleb sat in his usual spot behind the hotel dumpster. The blueprints were spread before him again, illuminated by the light from his small flashlight, a gift from one of the kids he'd helped at the junkyard. His fingers traced the old designs, and for the first time in years he let himself imagine. Not revenge, not riches. Just the simple satisfaction of turning a key and hearing an engine purr to life. Of people understanding that he'd once been someone who built important things. Maybe, he whispered again. And across the city, in her apartment, Elena Carter stared at her laptop screen, at the patent numbers that matched, at the evidence of decades-old theft. She knew what helping Caleb could cost her job, her career, possibly her future in the industry. But some things were worth the cost. She opened a new document and began typing. Not a resignation letter. Not yet. But something else. Plans. Ideas. A way forward that might, just possibly, give an old man back a piece of what he'd lost. Outside, the city lights blazed against the October darkness. Somewhere, Bradley Harlow slept soundly in his penthouse, dreaming of investor money and magazine covers. And in an alley behind a luxury hotel, Caleb Turner carefully folded his blueprints, tucked them back in his satchel, and allowed himself the smallest spark of hope. The Ferrari sat in a repair shop across town, its fuel injector finally being replaced by mechanics who didn't understand half of what they were doing. In 2 days it would run again. In 3 days everything would change. But tonight, the night was quiet. The city breathed. And 2 people, one who'd lost everything, one who was risking what she'd built, both stared at the same future, wondering what Friday would bring. Friday arrived with clear skies and sharp autumn air. Elena had barely slept, her mind racing through everything that could go wrong. She stood outside Caleb's usual shelter spot at dawn, holding a garment bag and a box from a department store. She found him already awake, sitting on his cardboard bed, staring at his blueprints like they held answers to questions he hadn't yet asked. "Morning," Elena said softly. Caleb looked up, surprised. "You're early. We've got work to do." Elena held out the garment bag. I brought you something to wear. The event starts at 6. Caleb stood slowly, his joints protesting the cold night. I've been thinking about this. Maybe it's not a good idea. It's a great idea, Elena countered. You deserve to be there, Caleb. You deserve to see what they built with your work. He took the garment bag with reluctant hands. Inside was a simple but dignified suit, charcoal gray, a white shirt, a dark tie. Nothing flashy, but clean and respectful. I can't accept this, Caleb began. You already did, Elena said firmly. There's a community center 3 blocks away. They'll let you shower and change. I'll wait. 2 hours later, Caleb emerged transformed. The suit fit reasonably well, and though his face still carried years of hardship, there was something different about him now. He stood straighter. His eyes held determination instead of resignation. You look good, Elena said honestly. Caleb glanced at his reflection in a store window. For a moment, he saw the man he used to be. Dr. Caleb Turner, engineer, innovator. Then the reflection shifted and he saw only an old man in borrowed clothes, about to walk into a world that had forgotten him. Let's get this over with, he muttered. The investor gala was being held at the Pinnacle Center, a modern glass building downtown that hosted high-profile events. By evening, luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Men in expensive suits and women in elegant dresses streamed through the entrance, greeted by servers offering champagne. Elena arrived with Caleb at 6:15, deliberately bit late to avoid the initial crowd. She'd signed them both in as her guests, listing Caleb as Dr. C. Turner, engineering consultant. The security guard barely glanced at the names before waving them through. Inside, the main hall was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern chandeliers casting soft light, and in the center of it all, Bradley's prototype Ferrari. The car had been modified to showcase the Harlow hybrid system, its hood propped open to reveal the engine beneath. Display screens showed technical specifications and performance data. Bradley stood near the car, surrounded by investors, his smile bright and confident. He wore a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. There he is, Elena whispered. Ready? Caleb's jaw tightened. As I'll ever be. They entered the main hall together. Almost immediately, whispers started. People recognized Caleb from the viral video, even in his suit. Phones came out. Someone giggled nervously. Bradley was mid-sentence explaining the hybrid system's efficiency ratings to a distinguished older gentleman, Marcus Hamilton, the primary investor, when he noticed the commotion. His eyes found Caleb, and his expression shifted from confusion to amusement to something harder. Well, Bradley announced loudly, his voice carrying across the hall. Look who decided to join us, the mechanic himself. The crowd's attention snapped to Caleb. More phones appeared. This was going to be all over social media within minutes. Caleb stood silent, letting Bradley play his game. Bradley walked toward them, his smile sharp. Did you come to finish the job? Finally fix my car? He gestured toward the Ferrari with theatrical flourish. Though I should warn you, actual professionals have already handled it. I'm not here to fix anything, Caleb said, quietly, his voice steady despite the stares. I'm here to see what you've built. Bradley laughed. What I've built? That's right. The revolutionary Harlow hybrid system. Something you wouldn't understand even if I explained it. Try me, Caleb said. Something in his tone made Bradley pause. This wasn't the meek homeless man from a few nights ago. This version of Caleb had steel in his spine. I'm not here to give lectures, Bradley recovered. But I am curious. You said you could fix the Ferrari's problem. You were quite confident about it, as I recall. The fuel injection issue? Caleb asked. Third cylinder getting uneven pressure from a misaligned regulator? Bradley's smile faltered slightly. That was exactly what the mechanics had found. "If I fix it now," Caleb continued, his voice carrying across the now silent hall, "will you still give it away?" That was the deal, wasn't it? Bradley's eyes narrowed. This was spiraling out of his control. But he was trapped by his own bravado and a room full of witnesses recording everything. "Sure," Bradley said, his tone dripping with false confidence. "If you make it run better than my team of professional mechanics already has, which I doubt, then yes, it's yours." He was certain Caleb would fail. The car was running perfectly now. Caleb approached the Ferrari slowly. The crowd parted for him. Elena stayed back, her heart pounding. This was it. Bradley activated the car's ignition from his phone app, a feature he'd been showing off all evening. The engine purred to life, smooth and powerful. He grinned at Caleb. "Sounds pretty perfect to me." But Caleb tilted his head, listening. To most people, the engine sounded flawless. But Caleb heard something else, a barely perceptible roughness in the transition between power modes, a hesitation that would compound over time. "May I?" Caleb asked, gesturing to the hood. Bradley waved dismissively. "Be my guest. Don't break anything you can't afford to replace." Caleb opened the hood fully and leaned in. His hands moved with surprising deftness for someone his age, tracing wires and connections. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording every moment. Elena watched Bradley's face. He looked amused but slightly nervous. Then Caleb did something simple. He reached into the engine compartment with a small screwdriver, one Elena had given him earlier, and adjusted a connection point on the hybrid regulator. Not dramatically, just a quarter turn. Then he disconnected a wire, cleaned the connection point with his sleeve, and reconnected it. "The hybrid transition sensor," Caleb explained to the air, his voice carrying in the silent hall, "needs direct contact for optimal power switching. Your mechanics reconnected it through an adapter. That creates resistance." He stepped back. "Try it now." Bradley, looking skeptical, activated the ignition again. The engine started, and this time, even people who knew nothing about cars could hear the difference. The purr was smoother, deeper, more confident. The transition between electric and combustion modes was seamless. Silence filled the hall. Then quietly at first, someone started clapping. Then another. Soon, genuine applause spread through the crowd. Marcus Hamilton, the lead investor, stepped forward. "That was remarkable. You clearly have extensive knowledge of hybrid systems." He extended his hand to Caleb. "Marcus Hamilton. And you are?" "Caleb Turner," Caleb said, shaking his hand. "Dr. Turner worked on naval propulsion systems," Elena interjected, moving to stand beside Caleb. "He's one of the pioneers of hybrid engine technology." Bradley's face had gone pale. "That's quite a story," he said quickly, "though I'm not sure how relevant ancient military projects are to modern civilian applications." "Oh, very relevant," Elena said, her voice clear and strong. She pulled out her tablet. "In fact, Dr. Turner's work is the foundation of your entire system." She activated the tablet's projection mode, linking to the hall's display screens. 2 images appeared side by side, patent documents. On the left was Caleb's original patent from 1992, complete with detailed technical drawings of a hybrid propulsion regulator system. On the right was Bradley's filing from 6 months ago for the Harlow hybrid system. The schematics were identical. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People zoomed in on their phone screens comparing the 2 documents. The patent numbers at the bottom of each were the same. "These aren't similar designs," Elena stated. "They're the same design. Bradley filed a patent for technology that Dr. Turner invented 30 years ago, technology that was stolen from him by Harlow Industries in 1994. Bradley's face cycled through emotions: shock, anger, panic. That's ridiculous. This is a completely original design that I've spent years developing. Then explain the identical patent number, Marcus Hamilton said coldly. That's not a coincidence. It's a mistake, a clerical error. Bradley started. It's theft, Elena interrupted. Dr. Turner has the original prototype plate with that patent number etched on it. He has documentation showing he worked for your father's company. He has 30 years of proof that this technology is his. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Phones were everywhere now, recording, posting, tweeting. Bradley's carefully constructed empire was crumbling in. Real time. You don't understand, Bradley said desperately. My father acquired those patents legally. Turner was an employee. His work belonged to the company. I never signed a transfer agreement, Caleb said quietly, but his voice cut through the noise. Your father tried to force me to sign over my rights. When I refused, he stole my work anyway. I've been living on the streets for 30 years while your family built an empire on my innovations. The simplicity of the statement, delivered without anger or drama, made it devastating. Marcus Hamilton turned to Bradley, his expression cold. Is this true? No, I mean, it's complicated. Bradley stumbled over his words. It's not complicated at all, Marcus said. You presented this as original work, as your revolutionary innovation. If it's built on stolen patents, every dollar invested would be legally compromised. He looked around at the other investors who were already backing toward the exits. I think we're done here. Wait! Bradley grabbed Marcus's arm. The older man shook him off. Don't contact me again, Marcus said, and expect to hear from my lawyers. One by one, the investors left. The reporters stayed, cameras rolling, sensing a bigger story than they'd expected. Bradley stood alone beside his Ferrari, his empire evaporating around him. He looked at Caleb with something between hatred and desperation. You're enjoying this, Bradley hissed. This whole time you were planning to ruin me. I didn't come to ruin you, son, Caleb said wearily. I came for the truth, that's all I ever wanted. Security began ushering people out. Elena took Caleb's arm gently. We should go. As they walked toward the exit, Caleb paused and looked back at Bradley, who stood alone in the emptying hall, his hand on the Ferrari's hood, as if it could anchor him. The engine's running properly now, Caleb called back. Take care of it. Then he walked out into the cool October night, Elena beside him, leaving Bradley Harlow standing in the ruins of everything he'd thought he'd built. By Saturday morning, the story had exploded across every platform. Homeless engineer exposes billionaire's fraud dominated headlines. The video of Caleb fixing the Ferrari and Elena's patent revelation had been viewed over 20 million times. Bradley Harlow's name was everywhere, and none of it was good. In his penthouse apartment, Bradley sat in darkness despite the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. His phone lay face down on the coffee table, buzzing constantly. He'd stopped answering hours ago. The exposure had been total and merciless. His company's stock had plummeted. Board members were calling emergency meetings. 3 major investors had already filed lawsuits. His social media accounts were flooded with condemnation. But worse than any of that was the look on Marcus Hamilton's face the night before. Disappointment. Disgust. The look you gave someone who'd revealed themselves as fundamentally dishonest. Bradley's PR team had left him a message. There was no spinning this. The best option was a public apology, immediate resignation from Harlow Industries, and hope the legal consequences didn't completely destroy him. He couldn't believe it. A week ago, he'd been on top of the world. Now he was the villain in a viral story about corporate greed and stolen genius. A knock at the door broke through his spiral. Bradley ignored it. The knocking continued. Mr. Harlow, it's Veronica Pierce. We need to talk. Bradley finally stood and opened the door. His PR director looked exhausted, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of someone delivering terminal news. "Make it quick," Bradley muttered. "The board voted this morning," Veronica said without preamble. "You're being removed as CEO effective immediately. They're also freezing your assets pending investigation into the patent fraud allegations." Bradley felt the floor drop out from under him. "They can't do that." "They can, and they did. It's in your contract. Ethical violations void your protections." Veronica's voice wasn't unkind, just factual. "I'm sorry, but there's more. The Navy's investigative branch is looking into whether classified information was misappropriated. Dr. Turner's work was partially classified, and if your father obtained it illegally—" "Stop," Bradley said. "Just stop." Veronica left the tablet on his counter. "My advice? Hire a good lawyer and consider making things right with Dr. Turner before this gets even worse. That's all I've got." She left, and Bradley was alone again with the ruins of his life. Meanwhile, across the city in Elena's modest apartment, Caleb sat at her kitchen table, looking uncomfortable with all the attention. Her laptop showed dozens of news articles, all featuring his face. "You're famous," Elena said, bringing him fresh coffee. "I never wanted to be famous," Caleb replied. "I just wanted people to know I wasn't crazy, that I'd actually built something meaningful. Once." Elena's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and smiled. "You'll want to hear this." She answered on speaker. "Hello? Ms. Carter, this is Dr. James Whitmore from the Engineering Foundation. I'm calling about Dr. Turner. We'd like to formally restore his patent under his name and offer our resources to help him reclaim legal ownership of his innovations." Caleb's eyes widened. Elena grinned. "We've also established a fund," Dr. Whitmore continued. "Several of your colleagues from Harlow Industries have contributed, along with public donations. People want to help Dr. Turner rebuild his life." After the call ended, Caleb sat in stunned silence. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Elena urged. "This is your chance to have your name back, your legacy." But Caleb looked troubled. "What about the young man, Bradley?" Elena blinked. "What about him?" "He's paying for his father's sins as much as his own," Caleb said slowly. "He grew up believing that technology was his, believing he was carrying on family innovation. Finding out it was all built on theft, that has to hurt. He humiliated you," Elena reminded him. "He was cruel. He was arrogant," Caleb corrected. "But arrogance comes from somewhere, usually from pain people are trying to cover up." He stared into his coffee. "Fixing broken engines is easy. Fixing broken people, that's harder." Elena shook her head in wonder. "You're a better person than I'd be." That afternoon, a group of young engineers arrived at Elena's apartment. They'd seen the story and wanted to meet Caleb. Among them was Shanice Williams, a brilliant 24-year-old who just graduated from MIT. "Dr. Turner," Shanice said, almost bouncing with excitement, "we want to help you continue your work. We've started something called the Turner Initiative, a crowd-funded engineering lab. We want you to mentor us, teach us what you know." Caleb was overwhelmed. "I haven't done engineering work in decades. I'm not sure I—" "You fixed that Ferrari in seconds," interrupted Marcus Webb, another young engineer. "You identified problems professionals missed. Your mind is still sharp, sir. We need teachers like you." They showed him plans they'd already drawn up. A small lab space, equipment, funding from donors who believed in the cause. It wasn't huge, but it was real. "We could start with hybrid systems," Shanice suggested. "Rebuild your original designs, modernize them for today's technology. Patent them properly this time, in your name." Caleb looked at their eager faces and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, tangible hope for a future beyond mere survival. "I'd be honored," he said quietly. That evening, as the sun set over the city, Caleb took a walk. He needed air, needed to process everything happening so fast. His steps carried him, without conscious thought, back toward the Pinnacle Center. The building was quiet now, the gala long over, but in the parking lot, under a streetlight, sat the red Ferrari. And beside it, polishing the hood with a cloth, was Bradley Harlow. Caleb stopped surprised. Bradley looked up, saw him, and froze. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Bradley broke the silence. They repossessed most of my cars, but this one was leased for the event, so they let me keep it until Monday. He laughed bitterly. Fitting, isn't it? The one that started everything. Caleb approached slowly. Up close, Bradley looked terrible, unshaven, eyes red, clothes rumpled. "Why didn't you just destroy me when you could have?" Bradley asked suddenly. "That first night when I mocked you. You knew who you were. You could have exposed me then." Caleb shrugged. "Because that's not who I am. And because you weren't the one who stole from me. Your father did." "I continued it," Bradley said. "I built my entire career on that theft. That makes me just as guilty." "Maybe," Caleb acknowledged. "But you didn't know the truth. Ignorance doesn't excuse everything, but it matters." Bradley was quiet. Then, "How do you not hate me?" Caleb smiled sadly. "Because hate wastes good fuel. I've burned enough in my life." He gestured at the car. "Mind if I look?" Bradley stepped aside. Caleb opened the hood and studied the engine again, this time without an audience. His hands moved lovingly over the components, adjusting tiny connections here and there. "You have good instincts," Caleb said. "The modifications you made to the display system, those were smart. You understand the theory even if you didn't create it." Bradley absorbed this. "My father used to tell me I was continuing his legacy, building on his innovations. I thought I was honoring him." "Children shouldn't have to carry their parents' sins," Caleb said. "But they do have to choose what to do with them once they learn the truth." He closed the hood. The engine was perfectly tuned now. "What will you do?" Caleb asked. Bradley laughed hollowly. "I don't know. I've lost everything. The company, my reputation, probably my freedom once the lawsuits finish. What's left?" "Everything that matters," Caleb replied. "You still have your mind, your hands, your ability to learn and build. That's what I had when I was on the streets, and it was enough to keep me going." He met Bradley's eyes. "You could spend your life fighting legal battles and hating yourself. Or you could do something harder, learn from this, and become someone different, someone better." Bradley's voice cracked. "I don't know if I can." "Neither did I," Caleb said. "But here we are." He started to walk away, then paused. "The Turner Initiative is starting a lab. We could use someone who understands hybrid systems, someone who's willing to work hard and learn properly this time. No credit, no glory, just real work." Bradley stared at him. "You'd let me work with you? After everything?" "I'd let you work for the engineers you helped train," Caleb corrected. "If you're serious about making things right, prove it with action, not words." He walked away into the evening, leaving Bradley standing alone beside the Ferrari. But this time, something was different. This time, there was a path forward visible through the wreckage. Bradley looked at his reflection in the car's polished hood. The man staring back wasn't the confident CEO anymore. He was someone smaller, humbler, and somehow more real. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his lawyer. "Don't fight the asset freeze. Give Dr. Turner whatever compensation is appropriate for his stolen work. I want to make this right." Then he sent a second message, this one to Elena. "Is the offer to join the initiative real? I want to help. No conditions." He didn't expect immediate forgiveness, didn't deserve it. But maybe, with time and genuine effort, he could build something real instead of something stolen. As he drove the Ferrari home for the last time, Bradley Harlow felt the weight of his old life falling away. What would replace it, he didn't know. But for the first time in days, he felt something other than panic. He felt possibility. And across town, in the small apartment that had become his temporary haven, Caleb Turner sat with Elena and the young engineers of the Turner Initiative, looking at blueprints for future projects. His hands shook slightly as he sketched improvements to his old designs, updated for modern technology. "This will work," Shanice said excitedly. "Dr. Turner, this is brilliant." Caleb smiled. For 30 years he'd been invisible. Now suddenly, he was seen, again. Not as a homeless man or a victim, but as what he'd always been underneath. An engineer, a teacher, a builder of things that mattered. Outside, October stars shone cold and bright. The city hummed with its usual noise. And somewhere in that city, two men who'd been enemies were taking their first uncertain steps toward something neither expected. Redemption through creation, healing through honest work, and the slow rebuilding of things that arrogance and theft had broken. The Ferrari would be sold. The patents would be restored. The lawsuits would grind forward. But those were just details. The paperwork of justice. The real work was just beginning. Following the emotional confrontation at the Ferrari and Bradley's tentative message about joining the Turner Initiative, the next week brought unexpected changes for everyone involved. Caleb found himself navigating a world he'd been absent from for 3 decades, while Bradley faced the reality of his fallen empire. Monday morning arrived with a peculiar stillness. Caleb stood outside the newly established Turner Initiative workshop, a renovated garage space in an industrial neighborhood. The building wasn't fancy, but it was functional. High ceilings, good lighting, and enough room for proper equipment. Young engineers were already inside, setting up workstations and unpacking donated tools. Elena arrived with coffee and pastries, her car trunk filled with supplies. She found Caleb standing motionless at the entrance, staring at the sign above the door. Turner Initiative, Engineering Lab. "Having second thoughts?" Elena asked gently. Caleb shook his head. "Just can't believe it's real. A week ago I was sleeping behind dumpsters. Now I've got a lab with my name on it." "You earned it 30 years ago," Elena reminded him. "You're just finally getting what should have been yours all along." Inside, Shanice and Marcus were testing equipment, their voices echoing in the large space. They waved when they saw Caleb, their enthusiasm infectious. But someone else was there too, standing awkwardly near the back wall. Bradley Harlow looked completely out of place in jeans and a plain jacket, his usual confidence replaced by visible uncertainty. Caleb's steps slowed. Elena noticed his hesitation. "He showed up an hour ago," Elena said quietly. "Asked if he could help set up. Didn't demand anything, just asked. I told him you'd decide when you got here." Caleb approached Bradley slowly. The younger man looked up and something flickered in his eyes. Shame, hope, fear, all mixed together. "I meant what I said in my message," Bradley began. "I want to help. I know I don't deserve to be here, but I need to do something right for once." Caleb studied him for a long moment. The other engineers had stopped working, watching this interaction with obvious curiosity. "Can you follow instructions?" Caleb asked finally. Bradley blinked, surprised by the simple question. "Yes." "Can you work without needing credit or attention?" "I can try." "Can you learn from people younger and smarter than you without letting your ego get in the way?" Bradley glanced at Shanice and Marcus, both watching with crossed arms. "Yes, I can do that." Caleb nodded slowly. "Then grab those toolboxes by the door and help Marcus set up the workbenches. And Bradley?" He waited until the younger man met his eyes. "This isn't about redemption or feeling better about yourself. This is about doing the work, real work. Understand?" "I understand." Bradley said quietly. He moved toward the toolboxes without another word, and the workshop gradually returned to its bustling energy. Elena caught Caleb's eye and smiled. He'd taken a risk, but it felt right. As the day progressed, an unexpected dynamic emerged. Bradley worked without complaint, following Marcus's instructions on assembling equipment stations. When Shanice needed someone to hold a heavy motor housing in place, Bradley volunteered immediately. He didn't offer suggestions or try to take charge. He just worked. During a lunch break, the team gathered around a makeshift table made from sawhorses and plywood. Bradley sat slightly apart, eating a sandwich he'd brought, not presuming to join the conversation. "You can sit closer," Shanice called out. "We don't bite." Bradley moved his chair a bit nearer but remained quiet. Marcus looked at him with open curiosity. "So what's it like? Going from Millionaire CEO to, well, this?" "Marcus," Elena warned. "No, it's okay," Bradley said. "It's humbling, terrifying. But also, honestly, it's the first time in years I've felt like I'm doing something real instead of just performing for cameras." Caleb listened without commenting, watching Bradley carefully. There was something genuine in the younger man's voice, a rawness that hadn't been there before. That evening, after everyone else had left, Caleb found Bradley still at the workshop, cleaning up the day's debris without being asked. "You don't have to stay late," Caleb said. Bradley looked up. "I wanted to finish properly. Besides, I don't exactly have a busy schedule anymore." He tried to smile, but it came out sad. Caleb picked up a broom and started sweeping alongside him. They worked in companionable silence for several minutes. "Can I ask you something?" Bradley said finally. "How do you do it? Forgive people who hurt you. I keep thinking about what my father did to you, what I continued, and I don't understand how you can even look at me without hating everything I represent." Caleb leaned on his broom, considering the question. "You know what I learned living on the streets. Hate's a luxury I couldn't afford. It takes energy to maintain, and I needed all my energy just to survive." He resumed sweeping. "But more than that, hate destroys the person carrying it more than the person it's aimed at. I watched it eat people alive out there. So you just decided not to hate?" "I decided to understand instead," Caleb corrected. "Your father stole from me because he was greedy, yes, but also because he believed he could build something bigger with my work than I could alone. He was wrong, but he had reasons. You mocked me because you'd been raised to see wealth and polish as the only measures of worth. You were wrong too, but you had reasons." Bradley absorbed this. "That doesn't excuse what we did. No, it doesn't. But understanding why people do wrong things is the first step to preventing those wrongs from repeating." Caleb met his eyes. "You can't undo the past, but you can choose who you become from here. That's what I'm giving you the chance to do." Later that night, as Caleb settled into the small apartment Elena had helped him secure, a modest studio paid for by the foundation fund, he found himself thinking about the day. The workshop had felt right. The work had felt purposeful. And Bradley, despite everything, had shown genuine humility. He pulled out his old satchel and removed the photograph of his late wife, Ruth. Her smile looked back at him from across the decades. "I think you'd like what's happening," he whispered to the image. "It's messy and complicated, but it's real. And that young man, Bradley, I think he might actually learn something." He remembered Ruth's words from that letter he'd found. "One day, someone will see your worth again. When they do, teach them grace." "I'm trying," Caleb said softly. "I'm trying." The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the workshop. A sleek black town car pulled up outside, and from it emerged a woman in an expensive suit, Veronica Pierce, Bradley's former PR director. She found Bradley organizing inventory in the storage room, a task as far from his old life as imaginable. "Veronica," Bradley said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Making sure you haven't completely lost your mind," she replied. looking around the humble workshop with barely concealed disbelief. Bradley, you're working in a garage for free. You're being sued by 17 different parties, and from what I hear, you're helping the man you publicly humiliated. I'm trying to make things right, Bradley said simply. Veronica shook her head. There's making things right, and then there's self-destruction. You need to focus on your legal defense, not playing mechanic. This isn't playing, Bradley said, his voice firmer than it had been in days. This is the first honest work I've done in my life. Everything before this was built on my father's theft. This is real. Real doesn't pay legal fees, Veronica countered. I know. Bradley set down the clipboard he'd been holding. But money won't fix what's broken inside me. Maybe this will. Veronica studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You've changed. I'm trying to. She pulled an envelope from her briefcase. The board asked me to deliver this. It's the settlement paperwork. They're offering Dr. Turner $5 million in restitution for the stolen patents, plus formal acknowledgement of his original authorship. They want this resolved quietly. Bradley took the envelope. I'll make sure Caleb gets it, but the decision is his. After Veronica left, Bradley found Caleb in the main workshop, teaching Shanice the principles of hybrid regulator calibration. This came for you, Bradley said, holding out the envelope. Caleb opened it, read the contents, and set it aside without much reaction. $5 million, Bradley said. That's life-changing money. It's less than they owe me, considering 30 years of lost income and damages, Caleb replied calmly. But it's not about the money. It never was. What do you want? Bradley asked. Caleb thought about it. I want my name restored. I want the historical record corrected so people know the truth about who invented that hybrid system. And I want to keep doing this, teaching young engineers, building things that matter. That's worth more than any settlement. He looked at Bradley. What about you? What do you want? Bradley was quiet for a long moment. I want to understand engines the way you do. Not just theoretically, but really understand them. I want to build something myself, from scratch, without stealing someone else's work. I want to know what that feels like. Caleb smiled. Then let's get to work. Over the following days, a rhythm established itself at the Turner Initiative. Caleb taught classes on hybrid propulsion theory. Elena managed the administrative side while still working part-time remotely. Marcus and Shanice led hands-on projects, and Bradley did whatever was needed. Cleaning, organizing, assisting, learning. One afternoon, Caleb assigned Bradley a project. Rebuild a small hybrid motor from salvaged parts. No instructions, no help beyond basic safety guidelines. Just the challenge and the tools. Bradley struggled. He'd spent years talking about engines, but rarely getting his hands truly dirty with the fundamentals. His first attempt failed completely. The second barely ran for 30 seconds before seizing up. This is harder than it looks, Bradley admitted, frustration evident. Caleb sat beside him at the workbench. That's because you're trying to force it. Engines have their own logic. You have to listen to what they're telling you. How do you listen to metal and wires? By paying attention, Caleb said. When you connect two components and something doesn't feel right, a resistance, a misalignment, that's the engine talking. Most people ignore those small signals. Good engineers learn to hear them. He guided Bradley through the proper connection sequence, not doing it for him, but showing him how to feel for the subtle feedback each part provided. There, Caleb said when Bradley finally made a clean connection. You felt that difference, right? How it seated properly instead of just fitting? Bradley's eyes widened. I did. It was subtle, but I felt it. That's the beginning of real understanding, Caleb said. By the end of the week, Bradley's motor was running. Rough, inefficient, but running. He'd built something with his own hands for the first time in his life. The team gathered around as the small motor hummed on the test stand. It wasn't beautiful or revolutionary, but it was real, and it was his. Congratulations, Shanice said, genuinely pleased. You built an engine. Bradley stared at the running motor, and something broke open inside him. Tears welled up, which surprised everyone, including himself. I never understood, he said quietly. All those years of presentations and investor meetings, talking about innovation and engineering excellence. I never actually understood what it meant to create something. To take raw materials and turn them into something functional. I was just wearing other people's genius like expensive clothes. Caleb put a hand on his shoulder. But now you know. And that knowledge changes everything. That evening, as the workshop emptied, Bradley found the envelope with the settlement offer, still sitting on Caleb's desk. He picked it up, then found Caleb outside, sitting on the front steps and watching the sun set. You should take this, Bradley said, holding out the envelope. $5 million could change your life. Caleb took the envelope and, to Bradley's shock, tore it in half. What are you doing? Bradley exclaimed. I don't want their settlement, Caleb said calmly. I want something else. What? I want Harlow Industries to publicly acknowledge the theft. I want the historical patents corrected with my name as the original inventor. I want a formal apology in writing. And I want them to fund scholarships for underprivileged engineering students, 10 full scholarships per year for the next 20 years. $2 million total, which is less than they're offering me. But it'll help 200 young people who might otherwise never get the chance. Bradley stared at him. You're giving away millions of dollars to help students you'll never meet. I'm investing in the future. Caleb corrected. Money won't bring back the years I lost. But helping young engineers, that matters. That lasts. He looked at Bradley. Besides, I have enough now. A place to live, meaningful work, people who respect what I know. What else do I need? Bradley sat down beside him on the steps. They watched the sun sink lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. You're teaching me more than engineering, Bradley said softly. Good, Caleb replied. Because engineering is the easy part. The torn settlement offer sparked unexpected consequences. When Caleb's counterproposal reached Harlow Industries' board, it created divisions. Some members wanted to accept immediately. It was cheaper and better PR. Others resisted the public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Elena sat in on one of the board meetings as a witness, having been subpoenaed for a related lawsuit. She watched the arguments unfold with growing frustration. Gentlemen, she finally interrupted, you're arguing about whether to tell the truth. That's not a difficult moral calculation. The board chairman, a stern man named Thomas Westwood, fixed her with a cold stare. Ms. Carter, you no longer work for this company. Your opinion is not required. Then let me give you facts instead of opinions, Elena replied. Dr. Turner's story has made international news. Public sentiment is entirely on his side. If you refuse his reasonable request, you'll face ongoing boycotts, protests, and legal challenges that will cost far more than $2 million. She pulled up her tablet, displaying social media analytics. The hashtag #Justice for Turner has been used 4 million times. Universities are questioning their partnerships with Harlow Industries. 3 senators have called for investigations into patent fraud. You can accept Dr. Turner's terms gracefully, or you can be forced to accept much worse terms later. The room fell silent. Thomas Westwood's expression didn't change, but several other board members looked uncomfortable. We'll take it under advisement, Westwood said finally. Back at the Turner Initiative, the team was facing their first major challenge. A local automotive company had approached them with an offer. Design a hybrid conversion kit for existing vehicles. It was a significant project, potentially the initiative's first major success. But there was a complication. The deadline was aggressive, 3 weeks for a working prototype, and the company wanted proven expertise leading the project. They specifically asked for Dr. Turner, Shanice explained during an emergency team meeting. They trust his reputation. Caleb looked uncomfortable. I haven't led a major engineering project in 30 years. Technology has changed. I'm not sure I'm the right person. You're exactly the right person, Marcus countered. We know the modern tech, but we need your foundational knowledge to make sure the design is sound. We'd be working together, Elena added. You'd have support every step of the way. Caleb still hesitated. Bradley, sitting quietly in the back, spoke up. You told me that good engineers listen to what the engine is telling them. Maybe you should listen to what these engineers are telling you. They believe in you. Maybe it's time you believed in yourself again. Caleb looked at Bradley, surprised by the insight. Then he looked around at the eager faces of his team. All right, he said finally. Let's do it. But we do it together. Everyone contributes. This is the Turner Initiative, not the Caleb Turner Show. The team erupted in agreement, already pulling up workstations and dividing responsibilities. The next 3 weeks became a blur of intense work. The workshop operated from early morning until late night. Caleb guided the overall design philosophy, drawing on his decades of experience with hybrid systems. Shanice handled the computer modeling and simulations. Marcus managed the physical prototyping. Elena coordinated with the client and handled logistics. And Bradley? He worked wherever he was needed, running for supplies, assembling components, testing connections, learning constantly. One evening, around midnight, only Caleb and Bradley remained in the workshop. Everyone else had gone home to sleep, but these two had become night owls, finding productivity in the quiet hours. Pass me that torque wrench. Yes, a torque wrench, Caleb said, not looking up from the regulator assembly he was calibrating. Bradley handed it over, then watched as Caleb made minute adjustments to the connection points. How do you know exactly how much to tighten? Bradley asked. Experience mostly, Caleb said, but also understanding the materials. Aluminum compresses differently than steel. Over-tighten and you risk cracking the housing. Under-tighten and you get vibration failures. He finished the adjustment and sat back. Here, you try the next one. Feel for the resistance point where the threads fully seat, then add just a quarter turn. Bradley took the wrench and attempted the calibration on the next regulator. He worked slowly, carefully, feeling for the subtle feedback Caleb had described. There, Bradley said. I think that's right. Caleb tested it. Perfect. See? You're learning. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Bradley spoke again, his voice thoughtful. My father used to bring me to the factory when I was a kid. I remember watching engineers work, seeing their focus and skill. I wanted to be like them. But instead of learning the craft, I learned to manage people who had the craft. I learned to take credit for their work. He paused. I became exactly what my father was, someone who valued ownership over creation. Caleb set down his tools. But you're not that person anymore. How do you know? Because that person wouldn't be here at midnight, learning to properly torque a regulator assembly. That person would be at a bar, blaming everyone else for his problems. Caleb smiled. You're doing the hard work of changing. That counts for something. Bradley looked like he might cry again, but he held it together. Thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. Nobody deserves grace, Caleb said. That's what makes it grace. You just have to be willing to receive it and become worthy of it through action. The following week, the prototype was ready for testing. The client's representatives came to the workshop, along with a small crowd of supporters who'd been following the Turner Initiative's progress online. The test vehicle was a 10-year-old sedan, nothing fancy. They'd installed the hybrid conversion kit over the previous 2 days, replacing the standard fuel system with their new design. Caleb stood before the assembled group looking nervous. Public speaking had never been his strength. This kit represents the combined efforts of our entire team, he began. The design philosophy comes from my original hybrid propulsion work, but the execution incorporates modern technology and innovations from our young engineers. If it works, the credit belongs to all of us. If it fails, the responsibility is mine. It won't fail, Shanice called out. The team laughed, tension breaking slightly. Caleb got into the driver's seat. Elena had insisted he be the one to make the first drive. He turned the key and the engine started smoothly. The hybrid system activated seamlessly, the dashboard display showing the transition between power sources in real time. He drove the car around the block and back, the system performing flawlessly. When he returned, the crowd erupted in applause. The client representatives were impressed. "This is excellent work, Dr. Turner. We'd like to place an order for 50 kits initially, with plans to scale up if market response is positive." Contracts were discussed. The Turner Initiative's first major success was secured. That night, the team celebrated at a modest restaurant nearby. Nothing fancy, just good food and genuine joy at their accomplishment. Bradley sat at the end of the table, participating in the conversation but still maintaining slight distance, not presuming full membership in the group. Elena noticed and slid into the seat beside him. "You can relax, you know. You're part of this team now." "Am I?" Bradley asked. "I still feel like I'm on probation. Like one mistake and I'll prove I haven't really changed." "You've made dozens of mistakes over the past 3 weeks," Elena pointed out. "Wrong calculations, mixed up components. That time you nearly dropped the entire motor housing. But you kept working, kept learning, kept showing up. That's what matters." She raised her glass. "To the team. All of us." Bradley clinked his glass against hers, something warm unfurling in his chest. For the first time since his empire collapsed, he felt like he belonged somewhere. Not because of money or status, but because he'd earned it through effort and honesty. Across the table, Caleb watched this interaction with satisfaction. Marcus caught his eye and nodded knowingly. Shanice grinned and raised her own glass. The Turner Initiative wasn't just rebuilding engines. It was rebuilding people. Later, as the celebration wound down and people headed home, Caleb and Bradley walked toward the parking lot together. The October night was cool, stars visible above the city lights. "The Ferrari gets picked up tomorrow," Bradley said quietly. "The lease company is taking it back. Thought you should know." "How do you feel about that?" Bradley shrugged. "It's just a car, a symbol of everything I was doing wrong. I won't miss it." Caleb stopped walking. "Actually, I have an idea about that. Walk with me." He led Bradley back into the workshop. In the corner, covered by a tarp, sat something they'd been working on during spare moments. A hybrid engine design based on Caleb's original principles, but built entirely from scratch by the team. "We've been thinking about building a demonstration vehicle," Caleb said. "Something that showcases what the Turner Initiative stands for. And I thought, what if we used that Ferrari? One last time, properly rebuilt from the ground up, with full documentation of every component and contributor." Bradley stared at the covered engine. "You want to put our engine in my old Ferrari?" "Not your old Ferrari," Caleb corrected. "The Initiative's Ferrari. A symbol of transformation, of taking something that represented arrogance and theft and turning it into something that represents collaboration and honest innovation." He looked at Bradley. "But only if you're comfortable with it. I know that car carries complicated memories." Bradley thought about the first night, his cruel words to Caleb, the laughter of the crowd. Then he thought about everything that had come after. The collapse, the rebuilding, the learning. "I think it's perfect," he said. "Let's make that engine run. But this time, let's do it right." They shook hands, and in that gesture was everything that had changed between them. From humiliation to understanding. From theft to restitution. From arrogance to humility. The Ferrari would run again, and when it did, it would tell a different story than the one it had started with. 6 weeks had passed since the Turner Initiative's first success, and now Caleb stood in the workshop staring at the rebuilt Ferrari. The team had transformed it completely over the past month. The engine was entirely new, built from scratch using his original hybrid principles combined with modern technology. Every component documented, every contributor credited. "Nervous?" Elena asked, appearing with coffee. "Terrified," Caleb admitted. "Going back to that expo center feels like walking into the place where everything went wrong." Bradley entered carrying presentation materials. He moved differently now, purposeful, efficient. The polished sheen of wealth had been replaced by the practical bearing of someone who actually worked with his hands. "The Ferrari's loaded," Bradley said. "We should head out soon." By evening, the Global Innovation Expo buzzed with energy. The Turner Initiative's display occupied a prominent spot, the red Ferrari positioned under perfect lighting. Everyone knew the backstory. The hall had become a stage for something larger than a product demonstration. Thomas Westwood, chairman of Harlow Industries, approached Caleb before the presentation. "Dr. Turner, the board accepts your terms. Full acknowledgement of the theft, formal apology, and the scholarship fund." He held out a folder. Caleb took it, hands steady despite the magnitude. 30 years of injustice, acknowledged in writing. "I'll sign," Caleb said, "but Bradley witnesses it." Westwood frowned but agreed. When Bradley arrived, looking uncomfortable, Westwood delivered unexpected news. "The board won't pursue further legal action against you. Your cooperation is noted." "I didn't cooperate for leniency," Bradley said quietly. "I did it because it was right." Caleb signed the papers. 200 scholarships funded, his patents restored, justice delivered. "One addition," Caleb said. "Each year, reserve one scholarship for students who've experienced homelessness, people the system overlooks." Westwood hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed." The presentation began at 7. Marcus Hamilton, the investor who'd abandoned Bradley months ago, sat front row. Shanice opened with the mission overview. Marcus Webb covered technical specs. Elena presented the business model. Then Caleb took the stage. The hall quieted. Everyone knew his story now, but many were seeing him in person for the first time. 6 weeks ago, I was sleeping behind a dumpster. Caleb began steadily. Tonight, I stand here with brilliant engineers who believed my knowledge still had value. This Ferrari was once a symbol of stolen innovation and humiliation. We've rebuilt it into something different, a demonstration of what happens when collaboration replaces theft. Bradley started the Ferrari's engine at Caleb's request. It purred perfectly, the hybrid system transitioning smoothly. Pure engineering excellence. Then came the sabotage. A rival engineer named Derek Sampson stood from the audience. "How do we know Dr. Turner actually invented these systems?" Sampson called out. "How do we know this isn't more appropriated technology?" Before Caleb could respond, Bradley stepped to the microphone. "I can answer that," Bradley said, his voice carrying. "Because I built my empire on stolen versions of his work. Because I've spent weeks learning from him and realizing the depth of knowledge he possesses, knowledge you can't fake. Dr. Turner taught me how to truly understand engines, not just talk about them. That kind of teaching only comes from someone who invented these systems from the ground up." The hall went silent. Marcus Hamilton stood. "Dr. Turner, would you address a technical challenge for us?" Caleb nodded. Marcus presented a complex problem about efficiency losses in hybrid transitions during extreme temperatures. Caleb walked to a whiteboard and spent 10 minutes sketching solutions, explaining thermodynamic principles, proposing a novel regulator design. The solution was elegant, clearly the work of deep foundational knowledge. When he finished, the hall erupted in applause. "That," Marcus said loudly, "is the difference between someone who steals knowledge and someone who creates it." Marcus approached afterward. "Dr. Turner, my company offers $2 million in funding for the Turner Initiative." Other investors followed. They'd hoped for 1 or 2 partnerships. They left with commitments exceeding $5 million. As the crowd dispersed, Caleb and Bradley stood beside the Ferrari. "I'm proud to call him my teacher," Bradley said quietly. This time, the words were true. Caleb squeezed his shoulder. "And I'm proud of the engineer you're becoming." 3 months later, spring arrived with warm breezes and new beginnings. The Turner Harlow Innovation Foundation had moved into a larger warehouse facility. Young engineers filled workstations throughout the building. The sound of tools and discussions created productive energy. Caleb stood in his modest office overlooking the workshop floor. His restored patent hung framed beside his desk, next to the first motor Bradley had built alone. Elena entered with paperwork. "The first scholarship recipients are selected. 20 students, including 2 who experienced homelessness." Caleb smiled, touching his wife's photograph on the desk. "Ruth always said my work would matter someday." A knock revealed a nervous young man clutching a folder. "Dr. Turner, I'm David Bennett, one of the scholarship recipients." "Please sit," David explained haltingly. "Foster care, homelessness at 17, 3 jobs while teaching himself engineering through library books." "You remind me of someone," Caleb said softly. "Me long ago, hungry to learn, just needing a chance. I won't waste this opportunity." "I know. And when you succeed, give someone else a chance. That's how we change things." After David left, Caleb returned to the workshop. The Ferrari sat near the entrance, a permanent exhibit. A plaque read, "Symbol of transformation. From humiliation to collaboration." Bradley taught students across the room, his movements confident, explanations clear. He'd become a genuinely skilled engineer, earning respect through competence. Shanice approached with news. "The patent for your temperature-adaptive regulator got approved. Companies are requesting licenses." "Licensing fees go to the scholarship fund," Caleb said. That evening, the team gathered for their monthly dinner tradition at the modest restaurant. During the meal, Elena raised her glass. "To Caleb, for teaching us that innovation comes from understanding, not ownership, and to Bradley, for showing us people can change through hard work. And to all of you," Caleb added, "for believing an old man with blueprints had something worth hearing." Later, Caleb walked through the foundation building alone. He stood before the Ferrari, remembering that first night. The mockery, the cameras, the laughter. Remembering sleeping in alleys, wondering if anyone would acknowledge what he'd lost. And now this. A foundation bearing his name. Students learning his knowledge. Legacy restored. Bradley entered carrying 2 coffees. "Thought you'd be here." They stood together looking at the car. "Do you regret not taking the $5 million?" Bradley asked. "Not destroying the company completely?" Caleb shook his head. "Revenge gives temporary satisfaction. This gives purpose. Besides, revenge wouldn't have changed you. Your transformation matters more than any money." "I've been thinking," Bradley said, "we should auction the Ferrari. Use the proceeds to expand scholarships. Let it fund opportunities for more students." "That's a good idea," Caleb said. "You're thinking like a true teacher now." They stood in comfortable silence. "One more thing," Caleb said. "I'm writing instructions for the Foundation's future. I'm naming you as my successor to lead the engineering program." Bradley's eyes widened. "I don't deserve that." "Nobody deserves grace," Caleb said, "but you've become worthy through your actions. You understand both sides, the temptation of taking credit and the satisfaction of earning it honestly. You can teach that better than anyone." Bradley's voice cracked. "Thank you." They walked toward the exit, turning off lights. Outside, the city stretched before them, lights twinkling in spring darkness. "You offered me the Ferrari if I made it run," Caleb said. "I did, and got something better. Dignity. Purpose. Watching young minds grow. and seeing you transform into someone who builds instead of steals. Bradley smiled. I lost everything and gained what I was missing. Real skill, real satisfaction in honest work. They reached their cars, Caleb's modest sedan, Bradley's old pickup truck. Same time next week? Same time. As they drove opposite directions, the foundation stood quiet behind them. Inside, the Ferrari waited. Soon it would be auctioned, transformed one final time into opportunity for students who needed it most. The story that began with humiliation ended with hope. The car that represented arrogance became a symbol of transformation. Two men, one who'd lost everything, one who'd had everything taken, found something unexpected in the ruins. Redemption through creation, healing through honest work, and the profound satisfaction of building things that truly mattered. Caleb drove home thinking about Ruth's letter. When someone sees your worth again, teach them grace. He had, and in teaching grace he'd rediscovered his own. If someone stole your life's work and left you with nothing, would you choose revenge or redemption? Like and subscribe for more stories about second chances and the power of grace.